Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a structured journey all the way back to 1921 to crack open a foundational text in applied mental science, Genevieve Behrend's classic book, Your Invisible Power. Whether you're already deeply familiar with early 20th century New Thought philosophy, or you're just kind of curious about where modern visualization techniques actually come from, we're going to lay out Behrend's core arguments directly from her own writings.
Can your thoughts actually physically shape your reality? That right there is the bold, central premise that anchors Behrend's entire philosophy, a question that has literally captivated human imagination for centuries. Now, our goal today isn't to prove or disprove her metaphysical claims. Instead, we're going to take a totally impartial, analytical look at the mechanics of her method, just to understand exactly what she was teaching her students over 100 years ago.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really unpack this century-old philosophy, we're going to take a highly structured approach. First, we'll look at the universal mind concept. Second, the magic lantern metaphor. Third, the exact steps for effective visualization. Fourth, the rules of mental attraction. And finally, the ultimate goal.
Starting right off with Section 1, the universal mind concept, which is really the absolute foundation of this mental science.
You see, before we get to the practical how-to of Behrend's visualization techniques, we've got to grasp the philosophical why. What exactly is the canvas she thinks we're painting on here? Well, Behrend argued that all space is filled with what she calls the universal mind. She defines this as an undifferentiated, formless substance of life. Imagine it like a vast, invisible ocean of raw creative potential. According to the text, this substance is infinitely sensitive and responsive. It's just sitting there, waiting to take physical shape, and the mold it uses to take that shape is your individual thought. Your mind, in her framework, basically specializes this universal energy into specific material forms. Now, to truly understand Behrend, we actually have to look at her teacher, Judge Thomas Troward. This specific quote from Troward completely altered Behrend's life. He said, "My mind is a center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression." I want to slow down here for a second and let the gravity of that 1921 text really sink in. Behrend memorized this exact paragraph. She believed that because her mind was a localized center of this universal power, it was bound by its very nature to constantly expand and produce new, better conditions in her life.
Which brings us to Section 2, the magic lantern metaphor, and how she believed visualization actually projects reality. And this brilliantly illustrates the mechanics of it all. Because, let's be honest, dealing with formless, universal substance can feel incredibly abstract. So, to make these dense ideas a bit more accessible, Behrend uses a really clever visual analogy. She maps the human mind directly onto a magic lantern projector. Your mental desire, the thing you actually want, is the picture slide. But, as we know, a slide and a projector is totally invisible without a light source. In Behrend's model, the light turning on is your will and your absolute faith. When you hold that slide steady and shine the powerful light of your will right through it, it projects onto the screen of physical reality.
But what happens when that light flickers? Behrend shares a pretty intense case study about a woman trying to visualize the return of her estranged husband. At first, she held the picture steady. But when he unexpectedly asked for a divorce to marry another woman, Behrend notes that the student completely lost her mental grip. She relaxed her will. By shifting the light of her focus over to fear and doubt, the original picture failed, and he ended up marrying the other woman. The takeaway? To project the slide, the light must remain fiercely steady, absolutely regardless of outward appearances.
Let's move on to Section 3, Steps for Effective Visualization. This is all about putting the theory into practice. So how do you actually keep that mental light steady? To answer how to apply this historical method, Behrend gave her students a highly specific, very structured routine. Step 1 is all about clarity. You have to decide exactly what you want. Step 2 requires you to retire early, impressing that desire onto your subjective mind just before you fall asleep. Step 3 is super specific. Rise at exactly 5 a.m. And Step 4 is to sit in a quiet room in a straight-back chair and meditate on your affirmation. She emphasizes that this has to be done without any strenuous tension. It should be enthusiastic, sure, but completely calm. Actually, scratch that. Right before you even picture your desire, she recommends this very specific breathing exercise to prep the mind. You're supposed to draw a large imaginary circle of light entirely around yourself. Then you inhale deeply down to the solar plexus and slowly exhale, mentally spraying your entire body with these imaginary rays of light going down and out through your feet. This whole exercise was designed to bring the objective mind into a state of deep, relaxed equilibrium.
All right, let's look at the proof. Section 4, Rules of Mental Attraction.
Because Behrend didn't just teach this theory, she claimed to have tested it rigorously in her own life, which is what led to her famous quest to study with Thomas Troward. To travel all the way to England to study with him, she needed funds. Specifically, she determined she needed exactly $20,000. Now, to put that into perspective, in the early 1900s, that was a massive sum of money. She began visualizing $21,000 bills every single morning and every single night, literally counting them out in her mind, strictly applying that magic lantern principle.
Let's trace this timeline, because her persistence here is pretty incredible. Before this experiment, she had spent 3 years wandering globally as a lonely, grieving widow. But after just 6 weeks of holding her mental picture steady, she claims she acquired the 20 grand through unexpected financial channels. However, Troward initially flat-out refused to take her as a pupil. Months later, he sent her an obscure biblical test question. Then, through a bizarre sequence of events, a Paris astrologer, who didn't even read horoscopes, by the way, gave her the exact correct answer to Troward's riddle on a random Sunday afternoon. By November 1912, her persistence finally paid off, and she was formally accepted as his only personal pupil.
From all these crazy experiences, she developed some very strict rules for her students. As you can see in these do's and don'ts, the biggest one is this: keep your picture a strict secret. Behrend warns that the moment you tell a living soul, your power is entirely dissipated. You must hold the picture cheerfully and let the specific details handle themselves. Do not try to force a specific channel or person to fulfill your desire, and absolutely no matter what, do not constantly change your picture. Changing the picture is kind of like double exposing camera film. You're just going to end up with a blurry mess.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how she illustrates that the channel of delivery can be, well, completely out of left field. She shares this hilarious anecdote about her building's doorman. He heard about visualization and decided to just picture $5. He had no idea how he'd get it. Well, shortly after, Behrend's pet parrot actually escaped out a window. The doorman managed to catch this biting bird, brought it back up to her, and she spontaneously handed him exactly 5 $1 bills. The manifestation happened, sure, but the channel, an escaped parrot, was entirely unpredictable.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, the ultimate goal, which goes way beyond material wealth.
So the crucial point is this. While stories about $20,000 and escaped parrots are super engaging, we really need to address the philosophical endgame of this whole practice. What was the actual point of all this manifestation? Behrend explicitly states that possessions alone absolutely do not bring happiness. They might give you a temporary cause for happiness, sure, but the true joy of living comes from within. She argues that material form is simply necessary for the universal spirit to recognize itself. But the true goal of visualization isn't just hoarding wealth. It's about bringing your mind into a state of profound order, peace, and lasting contentment.
As she writes right here, all said and done, happiness is the one thing which every human being wants, and the study of visualization enables you to get more out of life. This really emphasizes that underneath all the 1921 terminology and those highly disciplined 5 a.m. routines, the underlying drive of her work is simply addressing the universal human condition, our profound desire for joy and our need for freedom from fear.
So, we've explored the universal mind, the mechanics of the magic lantern, the strict routines, and the ultimate pursuit of inner joy according to Genevieve Behrend. Whether you view this as a really effective psychological tool to focus your actions, or you see it as a literal metaphysical law, the text challenges us to critically examine our own daily mental habits. It forces us to ask, are we projecting fear and doubt into our lives, or are we projecting order and joy? So what slide are you placing in your magic lantern today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning!